As the first rays of sunlight crept over the horizon, the African savanna awoke from its slumber. The air was cool and crisp, filled with the promise of a new day. Shadows stretched long across the ancient grasslands, and the world seemed to hold its breath, waiting for the warmth of the sun to chase away the night. The silence was profound, broken only by the distant calls of night creatures returning to their burrows, and the soft rustle of wind through the tall grass. The golden light spilled across the plains, painting the land in hues of gold and ochre, igniting the grasses and acacia trees with a gentle fire. Every blade of grass shimmered, and the landscape glowed with life and possibility. Dewdrops clung to the tips of the grass, sparkling like tiny jewels as the sun's rays touched them for the first time. The air was alive with the subtle scents of earth, wildflowers, and the lingering traces of the night's coolness. 3.2 million years ago, this vast expanse was the cradle of humanity, beautiful, dangerous, and untamed. Herds of ancient antelope grazed in the distance, their silhouettes barely visible through the morning mist. Massive, shaggy elephants lumbered slowly across the horizon, their trunks swinging as they searched for water. Predators lurked in the tall grass, always watching, always waiting. The air was thick with the scent of earth and wildflowers, and the sounds of life echoed across the open plains. The distant roar of a lion, the trumpeting of elephants, and the soft rhythmic thumping of hooves blended into a symphony of survival. In this world, a small band of Homo habilis stirred from their rocky shelter. They were not yet hunters in the way we know today, but survivors, bound together by necessity, by the first sparks of community, and by the shared struggle to endure. Their mornings began with uncertainty, but also with hope. The rocky outcrop that sheltered them was both a refuge and a prison, offering safety from the night's predators, but also limiting their view of the world beyond. As the first light filtered into their shelter, the group huddled together, sharing warmth and reassurance before venturing out. Their bodies were a remarkable blend of ape and human, strong and agile, but it was their minds that set them apart. Within their eyes flickered a new power, the ability to plan, to imagine, and to create. They were learning to shape their world, one small step at a time. Their hands, rough and calloused, were capable of grasping stones and sticks, the first tools of survival. Their faces, marked by curiosity and caution, revealed the beginnings of thought and emotion that would one day define humanity. As the sun climbed higher, the savanna came alive with the roar of predators. Lions and saber-toothed cats prowled the grasslands, their presence a constant reminder of the dangers that lurked nearby. Every movement in the grass could mean life or death. The Homo habilis listened intently, their senses sharpened by generations of survival. The distant roar of a lion sent a shiver through the group, a warning that the day's search for food would not be without peril. Above, the chatter of monkeys echoed from the trees, their calls both a warning and a signal of opportunity. The early hominids listened closely, attuned to every sound, the rustle of leaves, the distant cry of a bird, the sudden silence that meant a predator was near. The monkeys, ever watchful, served as an early warning system, their shrill cries alerting all creatures to the presence of danger or the discovery of food. Led by Kale, the group emerged from their rocky outcrop, hunger gnawing at their bellies as the day began. Each step into the open was a risk, but also a necessity. The search for food would define their day, shaping every decision and every movement. Kale, the eldest and most experienced, moved cautiously, scanning the horizon for signs of both prey and predator. The others followed, trusting his judgment, their eyes wide with anticipation and fear. Their world was a constant balance, find food or become food. Every day was a test of their wits and courage as they scanned the horizon for danger and opportunity alike. The savanna was both a provider and a threat, and survival depended on reading its subtle signs. The group moved in silence, communicating with gestures and glances, their senses alert to every shift in the wind, every movement in the grass. The youngest members clung to their elders, learning the ways of the land through observation and imitation. Today, hunger pressed them to take greater risks. The promise of a meal lay somewhere out in the vast grasslands, but so did the shadow of predators. As the sun rose higher, Kale and his band set out, driven by the ancient rhythm of survival, ready to face whatever the dawn would bring. The day's journey would be long and uncertain, filled with moments of hope and fear, triumph and loss. But in each step, in each decision, the seeds of humanity's future were being sown, one dawn at a time, on the ancient Savanna. The children's eyes were dull, their once bright and curious gazes now clouded with fatigue. Their energy was gone, hunger was everywhere, gnawing at their insides like a relentless predator. Alara clutched her infant tightly, her eyes scanning the horizon for any sign of food, worry etched deep in every face around her. The land yielded little. Roots and berries were scarce, hidden beneath the unforgiving soil. Scavenging was no longer enough to sustain them, the meager findings barely staving off starvation. Kale felt the weight of survival pressing down on him. Carcasses were rare, and the bones they found were often picked clean. Predators always beat them to the prize, their powerful jaws and sharp claws leaving nothing but scraps. The younger males, restless and desperate, looked to Kale for a solution, their eyes filled with a mix of fear and determination. Rorik, spear in hand, paced at the camp's edge, his hunger for action almost as intense as his hunger for food. Then a scout returned, breathless, gesturing urgently. He had seen a beast, a potential lifeline for the starving group. Near a muddy wallow, a giant saber-tusked boar, Metridiochoerus, waited, its massive form a mix of danger and opportunity. Fear rippled through the group, but so did hope. This could be their chance to turn the tide of hunger. In the heart of the ancient savanna, a monstrous shadow moved. Metridiochoerus, the saber-tusked giant. This beast was no ordinary animal. It stood taller than any man, its body a wall of muscle and bristling armor, its tusks curving outward like deadly scythes forged by nature itself. Each step it took sent tremors through the earth, and even the trees seemed to bow before its power. It was said the boar could uproot small trees with a single toss of its massive head, and even the fiercest lions gave it a wide berth, knowing that to challenge it was to court death. For the early humans, the idea of hunting such a creature bordered on madness. The hunters crouched low in the tall grass, hearts pounding, every sense straining to track the beast's movements. They watched from the shadows, their bodies tense, knowing that a single misstep could mean disaster for the entire band. Yet, the promise of the boar's meat was impossible to ignore. One successful hunt could feed the group for weeks, staving off hunger and giving strength to the weakest among them. The thought of such abundance was a powerful lure, a beacon of hope in a world where every day was a struggle for survival. Its hide was thick and tough, perfect for making shelters or protective clothing. The tusks, gleaming in the sunlight, could be shaped into tools or weapons, priceless resources in a harsh and unforgiving land. Every part of the animal was valuable, a treasure trove for those brave enough to claim it. But the risk was immense. The hunters exchanged anxious glances, their bravado slipping away as the reality of the task set in. The air was thick with tension, every member of the group acutely aware of the danger that lay ahead. In the background, mothers clutched their children tightly, eyes wide with fear. The children sensed the unease, their laughter silenced by the gravity of the moment. Even the most seasoned hunters felt their confidence waver, memories of past hunts flashing through their minds, some triumphant, others ending in tragedy. The boar was more than just an animal, it was a force of nature, untamable and deadly. Its eyes glinted with a wild intelligence, and its every movement radiated raw power. To face it was to stand on the edge of oblivion, to gamble everything for a chance at survival. The only hope lay in unity. The hunters gathered in a tight huddle, whispering strategies and recalling the lessons of past hunts. Each person's role was vital. One mistake could doom them all. They would need to move as one, to outthink and outmaneuver a creature that had survived countless threats. Cunning and courage would be their weapons. Faces set with determination, the hunters steeled themselves for what was to come. They crept through the grass, every muscle taut, every sense alert, knowing that their lives, and the lives of those they loved, hung in the balance. The decision loomed before them like a storm on the horizon, to face the Titan and risk everything, or to turn away and face the slow agony of starvation. In that moment, fear and hope mingled in the air, and the fate of the band hung in the balance. As the first rays of dawn crept over the wild horizon, Kale summoned the hunters to a clearing beneath the ancient trees. The air was thick with anticipation and the distant calls of waking animals. One by one, the members of the small band arrived, clutching their most precious possessions, tools that meant the difference between life and death. Kale laid out their humble arsenal on the earth, wooden spears, their tips fire-hardened but still rough, and sharp-edged stones, each one carefully selected for its weight and edge. The spears were crude, little more than branches stripped of bark, but they were the product of countless hours of labor and learning. The stones, sharper and more reliable, were the true tools of survival, meant for cutting, scraping, and sometimes for defense, but none of these implements were designed for slaying giants. As the group circled around, Rorik, the strongest among them, mimed a direct charge at the imagined beast, his hands gripping an invisible spear. Kale watched, then shook his head slowly. He knew brute force would only lead to disaster. Their strength, he insisted, was not in muscle, but in their minds, in their ability to plan, to adapt, to outthink their prey. With deliberate gestures, Kale outlined his idea. He traced lines in the dirt, showing how they could surround the monstrous boar, using the land itself as an ally. He pointed to a narrow ravine nearby, a natural trap carved by time and water, its walls steep and unforgiving. If they could drive the beast into this confined space, its size and power would become a weakness. The plan was simple in theory, but daring in execution. They would use noise, shouts, and the pounding of stones to create fear and confusion, herding the giant boar toward the ravine's mouth. The hunters listened, their eyes wide as understanding dawned. For the first time they saw themselves not just as individuals, but as a coordinated force, each person a vital part of a greater whole. This was more than a hunt, it was a leap in thinking, a moment when survival depended not on strength alone, but on the power of shared ideas. They would use the land itself as their weapon, turning the world around them into an ally against the impossible. The heart of Kale's daring plan was fire, a mysterious force that his people had only recently begun to understand. It flickered and danced, both beautiful and dangerous, a source of endless fascination and newfound hope. Fire was more than warmth against the chill of night. It was a shield against prowling predators, a beacon in the darkness, and now, Kale saw, it could become a weapon, one that might turn the tide in their struggle for survival. With careful hands, Kale demonstrated the ancient art, rubbing sticks, coaxing sparks, feeding the fragile flame with dry grass until it roared to life. The others watched, wide-eyed, as the fire crackled and spat, its power undeniable. The plan began to take shape in the flickering light. They would gather armfuls of brittle grass, laying it in a careful line along the animal trail where the giant boar was known to roam. The fire would not just frighten, it would guide, funneling the beast exactly where they wanted it to go. Swift-footed runners were chosen, each entrusted with a burning ember or a smoldering stick. At Kale's signal, they would ignite the grass, creating sudden walls of flame that would close in around the boar, driving it toward the waiting hunters. The group divided their tasks with quiet urgency. Some sharpened wooden spears to deadly points, others gathered smooth stones for throwing, while the rest collected as much dry grass as they could carry. Every hand was needed, every moment precious. Fear still lingered in their eyes, but as the preparations neared completion, it was replaced by a fierce determination. They were no longer just prey, they were hunters, united by a common purpose. As dusk settled over the savanna, the hunting party took their positions along the trail. Each hunter crouched low, hearts pounding, every sense alert. The trap was set, and every member of the group knew exactly what was expected of them. Kale would step forward to provoke the massive boar, risking everything to lure it into the trap. Rorik, the strongest among them, waited with stones in hand, hidden behind a bush. The fire-bearers stood ready, their torches smoldering, prepared to unleash the flames at the crucial moment. In the tense silence before the hunt, every breath, every heartbeat seemed to echo in the darkness. Everything depended on the next few moments, their courage, their cunning, and the power of fire. The hunt began with a tense, almost reverent advance through the tall, whispering grass of the ancient savanna. Every step was measured, every breath held, as the hunters moved in near silence, their bodies low and their eyes scanning the horizon for any sign of movement. The sun hung low, casting long, golden shadows that danced across the undulating landscape, painting the world in hues of amber and ochre. The air was thick with anticipation, heavy with the scent of earth and distant rain. Each blade of grass seemed to conceal a secret, and every rustle could have been the sign of their quarry, or a warning of danger lurking nearby. The savanna was alive with the subtle sounds of insects and birds, but to the hunters, every noise was magnified, every detail scrutinized for meaning. Kale's party crept toward the boar's wallow, hearts pounding in their chests like war drums. The muddy waterhole was a place of both promise and peril, a spot where prey gathered but predators often waited in ambush. The hunters exchanged glances, communicating without words, their faces set with a mixture of determination and fear. Each member of the group knew the risks. One misstep could mean disaster for all. The memory of past hunts, both triumphant and tragic, weighed on their minds. The mud squelched beneath their feet, and the scent of stagnant water mingled with the musky aroma of wild animals. They paused at the edge of the clearing, crouched low, every muscle tensed and ready to spring into action. The beast's scent hit them before its massive form came into view, a pungent, musky warning that the giant was near. The air seemed to vibrate with the animal's presence, and the hunters froze, senses sharpened to a razor's edge. Time seemed to slow as they waited, barely daring to breathe. Then, with a suddenness that made their hearts leap, the enormous boar emerged from the grass, its bristled hide glistening in the sunlight, tusks gleaming and eyes alert. The animal's sheer size was staggering, its shoulders rippled with muscle, and its snout rooted through the mud with a force that spoke of raw, untamed power. The boar paused, nostrils flaring as it tested the air, searching for the faintest hint of danger. For a moment, fear threatened to break their resolve. The sheer size and power of the creature was overwhelming, and the memory of past hunts, some successful, others tragic, flashed through their minds. The hunters' hands trembled, knuckles white around the shafts of their spears, but Kale steadied them with a look, his eyes fierce and unwavering, reminding the group of their plan and their purpose. He gestured silently, reaffirming the roles each would play. They could not afford to falter now. The fate of their clan, the promise of food and survival, depended on their courage and unity in this moment. Kale signaled. The hunters erupted into a sudden cacophony, shouting and banging stones together with all their might. The noise shattered the stillness, echoing across the grassland and startling the boar from its wallow. The animal's head snapped up, nostrils flaring as it tried to make sense of the chaos. The hunters fanned out, their voices rising in a coordinated chorus designed to confuse and terrify the beast. Stones clacked and rang, the sound bouncing off the trees and rocks, creating the illusion of a much larger force. The boar's eyes widened, its body tensing as it prepared to defend itself or flee. The giant rose, enraged and charged with terrifying speed. Its hooves tore up the earth, sending clods of dirt flying as it barreled forward. The animal's bellowing roar split the air, a guttural sound that sent birds scattering from the trees and made the hunter's blood run cold. The ground trembled beneath the boar's weight, and the hunters braced themselves, knowing that the next moments would decide their fate. The beast's eyes blazed with fury, and its tusks gleamed like ivory scythes, ready to cut down anything in its path. The hunters retreated along the planned path, the ground shaking beneath their feet as the massive animal thundered after them. Dust rose in their wake, and the pounding of hooves was a relentless drumbeat in their ears. Every second counted as they lured the beast toward the trap they had so carefully prepared. The hunters moved with practiced precision, weaving between rocks and trees, always staying just ahead of the charging boar. Sweat stung their eyes, and their lungs burned with exertion, but they dared not slow down. The path narrowed, funneling the animal toward the ravine, where the final act of their plan would unfold. At the signal, fire-bearers ignited the grass. Walls of flame roared to life, crackling and leaping skyward. The heat was intense and the smoke billowed, turning the air thick and choking. The hunters had mastered fire, turning it from a threat into a weapon, and now it served as their ally in the hunt. Flames raced through the dry grass, creating a living barrier that herded the boar toward the only escape route. The fire's light flickered on the hunters' faces, illuminating their determination and fear. The smell of burning grass filled their nostrils, and the roar of the flames mingled with the shouts and cries of the hunt. The boar, panicked by fire and smoke, bolted down the only open path, straight into the ravine. Driven by terror, it crashed through the undergrowth, desperate to escape the encroaching flames. The hunters watched, breathless, as the animal barreled toward the trap. The ground shook with each step, and the boar's frantic squeals echoed off the rocky walls. The smoke swirled around it, obscuring its vision and driving it ever forward. The hunters followed at a distance, careful not to get caught in the beast's path or the spreading fire. The hunters' shouts echoed, driving the beast onward, their voices rising above the roar of the fire. They waved their arms and hurled stones, making sure the boar had no choice but to continue forward, deeper into the ravine. The coordinated noise and movement left the animal with only one option: to run straight into the heart of the trap. The hunters' faces were streaked with sweat and soot, their eyes wide with adrenaline and hope. The plan was working. The titan thundered into the trap, its massive form framed by the rocky walls of the ravine. There was no turning back now. The hunters had succeeded in guiding their quarry exactly where they wanted it. The ravine's steep sides rose up on either side, hemming the boar in and cutting off any chance of escape. The animal skidded to a halt, nostrils flaring, eyes wild with fear and confusion. The hunters took up positions along the rim, ready for the final confrontation. Smoke and fire closed behind it, cutting off escape. The flames formed an impenetrable barrier, sealing the ravine and ensuring the beast could not double back. The hunter's strategy, born of experience and desperation, had paid off. The fire crackled and roared, casting eerie shadows on the rocky walls and illuminating the tense scene below. The boar paced back and forth, trapped and furious, its breath coming in ragged gasps. The hunters took their positions above and at the ravine's mouth, spears poised and eyes fixed on the trapped animal below. Each hunter felt the weight of the moment, the culmination of days of planning, risk, and courage. Their hands tightened on their weapons, knuckles white, as they prepared for the final assault. The air was thick with tension, every sense heightened, every muscle coiled and ready to strike. The final confrontation was at hand. In the flickering light of the fire, man and beast faced each other, each aware that only one would emerge victorious from the gauntlet of fire and fury. The hunters steadied their breathing, recalling every lesson learned from past hunts, every scar earned in the struggle for survival. The boar lowered its head, tusks gleaming, ready to fight for its life. For a heartbeat, time seemed to stand still, the world reduced to the narrow confines of the ravine, the crackle of fire, and the pounding of hearts. Then, with a collective cry, the hunters surged forward, spears raised, prepared to claim their prize or pay the ultimate price in the unforgiving wilds of prehistory. Hemmed in by the sheer, unforgiving walls of the ravine, the giant boar's immense size, once its greatest asset, now became a fatal flaw. The beast paced frantically, its hooves scraping against loose stones, nostrils flaring as it searched for escape. But there was none. Above, Rorik and his band of hunters gathered at the cliff's edge, their faces set with grim determination. With a signal, they unleashed a barrage of stones, each rock whistling through the air before crashing down onto the trapped titan. The boar bellowed in rage and pain, its cries echoing off the canyon walls, but the hunters did not relent. One stone, heavier and sharper than the rest, struck the beast squarely on the snout. The impact sent a spray of blood into the dust-choked air, and the boar reeled, momentarily stunned and disoriented. Sensing their advantage, the hunters descended into the ravine, encircling the wounded giant. Spears jabbed at its flanks and underbelly, each thrust met with a spray of blood and a furious squeal. The boar twisted and lunged, but the hunters moved as one, their movements practiced and precise. Suddenly, the boar lashed out with terrifying force, its tusks catching one hunter in the thigh. The man cried out, collapsing to the ground, but his companions rushed in, dragging him away from the beast's reach as others closed ranks to protect him. The struggle descended into chaos. Dust and blood mingled in the air, obscuring the frantic movements of man and beast. The hunters shouted to one another, coordinating their attacks, while the boar thrashed and charged, desperate to break free. Yet through the confusion the hunters pressed on. Their unity, honed by countless hunts and shared hardship, hardened their resolve. Each man knew his role, each trusted the others with his life. The boar's strength began to ebb, blood poured from its wounds, staining the rocky ground. Its breath came in ragged gasps, and its movements grew sluggish under the relentless assault. Another stone, hurled with all the force a desperate hunter could muster, struck the beast's temple. The boar staggered, its massive legs buckling beneath its weight. For a moment it seemed to fight the inevitable, swaying on unsteady feet. With a final defiant roar that shook the ravine, the titan collapsed. Its body hit the ground with a thunderous crash, sending up a cloud of dust that hung in the still air. Silence fell at last. Only the crackle of dying fires and the groans of the injured broke the hush, as the hunters gathered their breath and tended to their wounded. Against all odds, the impossible had been achieved. The band stood victorious over the fallen titan, forever changed by the battle they had survived together. The hunters returned as heroes, their bodies weary but spirits soaring as they dragged the colossal boar back to camp. The sight of the massive animal sent a ripple of awe and excitement through the waiting community. Relief and celebration swept through the band. Hunger would be banished, at least for now. Elders embraced the hunters, children ran to greet them, and laughter echoed across the clearing. With practiced hands the tribe set to work. Using sharp stone tools, they butchered the beast, everyone, young and old, working together in a flurry of activity. The air filled with the sound of stone scraping against bone and the scent of fresh meat. The fire that had been their weapon now became their hearth. Flames flickered and danced, casting warm light on faces etched with exhaustion and pride. Meat roasted over glowing embers, fat sizzling and smoke curling upward. The aroma was irresistible, drawing the family close, their mouths watering in anticipation. The first taste was pure joy. Victory, survival, and relief mingled in every bite. Eyes closed in satisfaction, and for a moment, the hardships of the wild faded away. Children laughed, their bellies full for the first time in weeks. They shared food, their playful shouts rising above the crackle of the fire. The feast lasted long into the night, faces glowing in firelight and moonlight. Shadows danced on the ground as stories were told and memories forged. They honored Kale's wisdom, whose plan had led them to victory, and the injured hunter's bravery, whose sacrifice would not be forgotten. Around the fire their bonds grew stronger than ever, united by triumph, gratitude, and hope for the days ahead. As the firelight flickered and danced on the rough, ancient stone walls, a profound transformation began to take root in the hearts of those gathered. The night was thick with the scent of wood smoke, mingling with the earthy aroma of damp soil and crushed leaves beneath their feet. Shadows leapt and twisted across the cave, painting the faces of the tribe with shifting patterns of gold and black. The air was alive with anticipation, every breath drawn in slow, expectant silence. For countless generations these people had survived by instinct, by muscle and bone, by the raw will to endure. But tonight something new was awakening, a spark of meaning, a moment that would echo through the ages and shape the very soul of humanity. In the heart of the circle, Kale, a young hunter with eyes sharp as flint and a spirit unbowed by fear, rose to his feet. The fire's glow cast his shadow tall and wild against the cave wall, transforming him into a figure both familiar and mythic. The tribe's eyes followed him, their faces illuminated by the flames, their bodies huddled close for warmth and comfort. Kale's voice, steady and clear, broke the silence, not with mere words, but with the rhythm and cadence of something ancient, something that reached beyond language. He began to recount the day's hunt, his words weaving through the air like smoke, his hands painting the story with sweeping gestures and vivid living sounds. Kale crouched low, his body tensed and coiled, mimicking the sudden explosive charge of the giant saber-tusked boar. His voice rumbled with the animal's fury, a deep guttural sound that sent a shiver through the circle. The tribe could almost feel the pounding of hooves against the earth, the rush of wind as the beast barreled forward, the raw primal fear that surged through their veins. Kale's hand sliced through the air, capturing the chaos of the hunt, the desperate scramble for safety, the moment when fear threatened to overwhelm them all. And then, with a sudden shift, he became the spark of a plan, the glimmer of hope that turned panic into purpose. The group watched, eyes wide and breath held, as Kale relived every heartbeat of the day's events. For a moment they were no longer just witnesses to the story, they were participants, their minds and bodies swept up in the memory of danger and triumph. The children clung to their mothers, elders leaned forward, and even the bravest hunters felt their hearts race as Kale's tale unfolded. The cave was silent, but for the crackle of the fire and the soft, collective gasp of the tribe, each person reliving the hunt as if it were happening again before their eyes. When Kale reenacted Rorik's daring stone throw, the moment when courage overcame terror, the tribe erupted in cheers and laughter, their voices echoing off the stone. Pride swelled in their chests, a shared sense of victory that bound them together. But as Kale showed the wounded hunter, his body slumping in pain, a hush fell over the circle. The laughter faded, replaced by a deep collective ache of worry and relief. Their emotions rose and fell with the story, each twist and turn binding them together in a tapestry of memory and meaning, of shared experience and hope. This was more than a tale, it was the first story, the birth of oral tradition. Around that fire a legend was born, destined to be passed from parent to child, from elder to youth, carrying lessons and hopes across generations. In that moment, the tribe became more than a group of survivors. They became keepers of memory, creators of culture. The story was not just entertainment, it was a guide, a warning, a celebration, and a promise. It was the beginning of something greater than any one person, a thread that would weave through the fabric of their lives and those yet to come. As the story reached its end, Rorik, the brave hunter whose stone had turned the tide, stepped forward. In his hands, he held the great boar tusk, gleaming in the firelight, heavy with meaning and memory. He presented it to Kale, not just as a trophy, but as a symbol of victory, respect, and the unbreakable bond they shared as hunters and friends. The tusk was more than bone, it was a testament to their courage, a relic of their struggle, a piece of the story made real. Kale lifted the tusk high above his head, and the tribe fell silent, their eyes fixed on the gleaming relic. In that gesture, the tusk became more than a simple object, it became a sacred relic, the first object of ritual, a sign that their deeds and their stories would live on. The ritual had begun, and with it, a new way of understanding the world. The tribe felt the weight of history settle upon them, the knowledge that they were part of something vast and enduring. The celebration continued long into the night. There was feasting and laughter, the sharing of food and stories, the warmth of unity. The tribe gathered around the fire, passing roasted meat and wild fruits, their voices rising in song and memory. Old wounds were soothed by gentle hands, new friendships forged in the glow of the flames. Children played at the edge of the circle, mimicking the hunt, their laughter a promise of the future. The tribe felt the strength that came from belonging to something greater than themselves, a family, a people, a culture in the making. They had triumphed not with brute strength alone, but with clever minds, crafted tools, and the trust that bound them together. Their victory was not just over the boar, but over fear and uncertainty, over the darkness that once separated them. The tools they had shaped, the plans they had made, and the trust they had built were as important as any weapon. In their unity, they found a power greater than any beast, a power that would carry them forward into the unknown. In the fire's gentle glow, they were more than mere survivors. They were a people, united by story, ritual, and hope, taking their very first steps on the long, extraordinary journey of humanity. The night stretched on, the stars wheeling overhead, and in the warmth of the fire and the strength of their bonds, the tribe found the courage to dream of tomorrow. Their stories, their rituals, and their unity would become the foundation of all that was to come, a legacy that would endure for millions of years. As the embers of the night's fire smoldered and the first pale hints of dawn crept across the horizon, a quiet restlessness stirred among the tribe. The memory of Kale's story and the weight of the sacred tusk lingered in the cool morning air, mingling with a sense of possibility. The world felt changed, larger, deeper, full of meanings that could not be spoken but yearned to be shared. While most of the tribe still slept, Kale sat near the dying fire, his gaze fixed on the tusk in his hands. Its surface was smooth and cool, but beneath his fingertips he felt the echoes of the hunt, the laughter, the fear, and the triumph. An idea flickered within him, a need to make the moment permanent, a mark that would last beyond words, beyond memory. With a sharp flint and gentle patience, Kale began to carve. Each line etched into the tusk was a memory, the swirling charge of the boar, the circle of hunters, the blazing fire at the center. Other tribe members awoke and gathered around, drawn by the soft scraping and the hush of creation. Soon others joined in, bringing stones, bones, and sticks, each wishing to leave their own mark. Together they carved and painted, using pigments from crushed berries and soot from the fire. They adorned the cave walls with scenes of the hunt, of fire and fury, of unity and triumph. Hands pressed against stone left prints, signatures of their presence, proof that they had lived, that they had mattered. As the sun climbed higher, its light spilled into the cave, illuminating the fresh symbols. The tribe gazed at their work, wonder and pride glowing in their eyes. These were more than decorations. They were messages to the future, silent stories that would outlast any voice. In that moment, symbols were born, a new language, a way to remember, to teach, to dream. The tribe realized that with every mark they shaped not just the world around them, but the world within. Their stories would not fade with the dying fire, their memories would not be lost to time. They had learned to speak without words, to leave a legacy in stone and bone. And so, as the sun rose fully and the day began, the tribe stepped out into a world forever changed. Their hearts carried the knowledge that they were not only survivors, not only storytellers, but creators, makers of meaning, builders of a future where every mark mattered. The dawn of symbols had arrived, and with it, the promise that their story would never be forgotten. As days turned to seasons, the cave walls blossomed with new stories. Each symbol, once a fresh creation, became a guide for the next generation. Children traced the lines with curious fingers, learning not just what had happened, but who they were. The elders gathered the young around the fire, pointing to the painted beasts and handprints, their voices weaving lessons into legend. Soon, visitors from distant clans arrived, drawn by tales of the marked cave. They stood in awe, running their hands across the cool stone, recognizing the power of what had been left behind. Some brought their own colors and shapes, blending their stories with those of Kale's tribe. The cave became a meeting place, a living memory, always growing, always changing. As the moon waxed and waned, the tribe realized that the marks were more than memories. They were bridges, connecting past to present, kin to stranger, dream to reality. For the first time they saw themselves as part of something greater, a tapestry woven from the hands and hopes of many. And so, beneath the ever-watchful stars, the tribe continued to create. Their legacy was no longer just in the hunt or the fire, but in every symbol etched and every story shared. The echoes of their journey would reach far beyond this cave, rippling outward into the endless future, proof that even in the quietest mark, meaning endures. As the years unfurled, the cave's painted walls became more than a chronicle. They became a promise. Young hands, once only students, now pressed new symbols beside the old, their pigments brighter, their shapes bolder. With each gathering, the tribe's rituals deepened, tales told not just of survival, but of dreams for what could be. Around the flickering fire, elders encouraged questions, inviting the youth to imagine worlds yet unseen. One dusk, a child named Lyra traced out a new figure, a soaring bird, wings wide, unlike any before. The elders watched in wonder as the children debated its meaning. Was it a sign of hope, a wish for freedom, or perhaps a messenger for those yet to come? The discussion sparked laughter, curiosity, and awe. Soon, the cave's entrance became crowded with not just the tribe, but travelers from distant lands, each bringing a story, each leaving a mark. Together they began to share seeds, beads, and carved stones, trading not only goods but knowledge of plants, stars, and distant rivers. The cave became a cradle of invention. New tools were dreamed up, new songs invented, new dances performed beneath the moon's silver gaze. As the seasons turned, Kale's tribe realized the greatest legacy was not the hunt, nor the fire, nor the painted walls. It was the spirit of creation, the courage to try, to fail, to dream, and to share. In every mark, every story, every gathering, they planted the seeds of tomorrow, knowing that what they began here would blossom long after their voices had faded. In this sacred place, humanity's future took root, growing, ever-reaching, toward the light. And so, as the moon waxed and waned above the painted cave, time itself became a river, carrying stories, inventions, and dreams from one generation to the next. The tribe began a yearly ritual. On the longest night, the elders would gather the youngest children at the river's edge. There, in the hush of midnight, each child would receive a small token, a smooth stone, etched with a symbol from the cave. With trembling hands, the children would trace the carvings, feeling the weight of countless ancestors flowing through them. One year, Lyra, now older and wiser, stood among the elders. She remembered her soaring bird, now faded but still vibrant on the wall, and watched as a new child pressed a pebble into the silt. The river, ever moving, whispered around their feet, reminding them that every legacy is both gift and responsibility. As dawn crept across the sky, the tribe sang a new song, one that wove together old words and new hopes. The river's surface shimmered, reflecting not just faces, but the promise of all who would come after. In that moment, the tribe understood. Their inheritance was not only the land or the painted stories, but the unbroken chain of wonder, courage, and kinship. With every sunrise, the river of inheritance would flow on, carrying humanity's dreams ever forward, into the waiting arms of tomorrow. As seasons turned and the river's banks shifted, the tribe found themselves looking beyond the familiar waters. There, across the shimmering current, the land beckoned, untamed, mysterious, full of new promise. One dawn, guided by the wisdom of their elders and the courage kindled in their hearts, a small band set forth across the river. Their feet touched unfamiliar earth, and every step pressed a new story into the soil. They carried with them the painted stones, the echo of ancient songs, and the embers of the first fire. The world before them was vast, rolling grasslands, shadowed forests, distant mountains crowned in mist. Every sight was a question, every sound an invitation. As they journeyed, they marked their path with fresh symbols. building cairns and etching stories into bark and stone. Each mark was both a memory and a promise, that no matter how far they roamed, the heart of their people would endure. Nights around the fire became a tapestry of voices, old tales retold, new adventures woven in. The children listened wide-eyed, tracing their tokens, dreaming of the unknown. In the hush of starlight, the tribe realized that the river was not a boundary but a beginning. Their inheritance was not just survival but the courage to journey, to wonder, and to shape the world with every step. And so, with every dawn, their path stretched onward, an unbroken thread of curiosity and hope, leading them ever beyond the river into the endless possibility of tomorrow. As the tribe pressed further into the unknown, the landscape itself became a living map, etched not on parchment, but in memory and meaning. With each sunrise they gathered at the edge of their new camp, tracing circles in the dust to recall the river, the stones, the ancient fires. The elders spoke softly, guiding nimble hands to draw lines for distant hills, and dots for the groves where wild fruit grew sweet. Soon, the children began to add their own marks, symbols for laughter shared beneath towering trees, for the rush of deer across golden plains, for the thunder that rumbled far beyond the horizon. Their map grew, not only with places, but with dreams and desires, a path to a hidden lake whispered about in stories, a spiral marking the place where a rainbow touched earth. As days turned to seasons, these maps of dreams became precious heirlooms, passed from hand to hand, generation to generation. They were more than guides. They were promises that no journey need be taken alone, that every path walked in hope would leave a trace for others to follow. In the quiet glow of dawn, the tribe knew their greatest inheritance was not the land they crossed, but the dreams they dared to chart upon it, and so, with every footstep, they continued to draw their world, one symbol, one story, one dream at a time, mapping the boundless horizon of what could be, together. As the map of dreams grew ever more intricate, a new role quietly emerged within the tribe, the keepers of the map. These were not just the eldest, nor only the swiftest, but those whose hearts beat in rhythm with the stories of the land. By flickering firelight and beneath the watchful gaze of the stars, the keepers would gather the children and travelers, unrolling the tapestry of symbols and lines with reverence. With careful hands, they traced the winding paths of their ancestors, retelling the tale of each mark. The bend in the river where the sun first kissed the morning mist, the hollow tree where laughter echoed after the storm, the secret clearing where a brave child once faced the wild alone. Each symbol became a song, each story, a thread binding the tribe across time. But the keepers did more than remember. They listened, to the quiet hopes of the young, to the silent wishes carried on the wind, to the dreams whispered in sleep. When a new hope was spoken, the keepers would invite its dreamer to draw it onto the map, a promise that every voice, every vision, had a place in the journey ahead. In this way, the map was never finished. It grew, alive as the people themselves, stretching toward horizons yet unseen, and as the tribe pressed onward, the keepers ensured that no dream was ever lost, and that the path forward was always lit by the stories that came before. Even as the world changed around them, the tribe's true compass remained, the living map, and the keepers who guarded both the roads behind and the dreams still waiting to be found. On a night when the moon hung low and golden, the tribe gathered for a ritual unlike any other, the Night of New Paths. Shadows danced across the faces of the keepers as they unfurled the ever-growing map, its surface shimmering with the marks of countless journeys and dreams. But tonight the air was thick with anticipation, for it was the time to welcome what had never been imagined before. One by one the youngest among the tribe stepped forward, each carrying a small token, a feather, a smooth stone, a sprig of wild thyme. With trembling hands they pressed these gifts onto the map, each one a symbol of a wish, a challenge, a hope for the days to come. The keepers, with gentle smiles, guided their hands, tracing new lines that branched from old trails, weaving fresh stories into the ancient tapestry. Around the fire, elders shared tales of their own first markings, reminding all that every path, no matter how uncertain, once began as a single daring mark upon the unknown. Laughter mingled with the crackle of flames, and for a moment the boundaries between past and future blurred. The tribe understood. The map was not just a record of where they had been, but a promise of where they could go. As the fire burned low, the keepers lifted the map for all to see, a living testament to courage, curiosity, and the unbroken chain of dreams. In the hush that followed, everyone knew that tomorrow new paths would beckon, and together they would walk them, guided by the stories they dared to write tonight. As the embers faded and the tribe drifted to their shelters, a handful remained, those restless souls known as the Dreamers. They gathered at the edge of the camp, where the grass met the endless dark, their eyes reflecting the last glimmers of firelight. It was here, in the hush between night and dawn, that the Dreamers kept their vigil. Each dreamer carried a story untold, a vision unspoken. In silence they sat together, listening to the music of the wind and the distant calls of night creatures. Some traced invisible patterns in the dirt, others gazed skyward, mapping constellations with their fingertips. They spoke little, for tonight was not for words, but for listening, to the world, to their hearts, and to the ancient pulse that bound them all. One by one they closed their eyes and let their minds wander. Some saw rivers that curved beyond the horizon, others imagined forests where no foot had ever fallen, or stars that beckoned with secrets yet to be named. These were not just dreams, but seeds, tiny sparks that with time might ignite new journeys or shape the stories to come. As the first light crept across the savannah, the Dreamers rose. They carried no map, no tools, only the quiet certainty that every great path begins with a single, wild idea. Side by side they returned to the heart of the tribe, their hearts alight with possibility. In the days that followed, their dreams would take root, whispered first in hushed conversations, then drawn boldly onto the tribe's living map. The Dreamers' Vigil had ended, but its echoes would linger, reminding all that the future belongs to those brave enough to imagine it, and wise enough to share it. The night had given birth to new dreams, and with the dawn, the journey began again. As the first rays of sunlight stretched across the savannah, a subtle transformation took hold within the tribe. Inspired by the Dreamers' Vigil, a small group gathered in the quiet glow of morning. These were the Cartographers of Dawn. Not cartographers in the way we know them now, but pioneers in spirit, driven by a desire to capture the shape of dreams and the memory of journeys. With sticks, stones, and ochre-stained fingers, they began to etch and paint upon flat slabs of bark and smooth river stones. Every line traced the memory of a path walked, every symbol marked the place of a discovery, a danger, or a wonder. They worked in silence, each movement careful and reverent, as if drawing the very soul of the land onto their primitive canvases. Around them the tribe watched, children wide-eyed, elders nodding with quiet pride. The cartographers did not simply record where they had been, they mapped the places they yearned to go. The rivers glimpsed in dreams, the mountains whispered of in story. For the first time the tribe saw their world not just as it was, but as it could be. These maps became more than guides, they were promises, promises that no journey need be forgotten, no dream need be lost. In the warmth of the new day, the Cartographers of Dawn gifted their creations to the tribe, laying them at the center of the camp for all to see, to study, to add their own marks. And so the tribe's story grew richer, its future brighter. The cartographers' hands had turned dreams into something lasting, reminders that the journey forward was not only possible, but already begun. In the hush of dawn, the tribe discovered that every step, every vision could shape the world for generations yet to come. As the maps of dreams rested in the heart of the camp, another quiet transformation began. From the shadows of the morning, the elders gathered, their hands worn by time but steady with purpose. They were the weavers of memory, keepers of stories, guardians of the tribe's deepest wisdom. With fibers stripped from tall grasses and strands of animal sinew, they began to weave. Each strand was chosen with care, colored by natural dyes that echoed the ochre and charcoal of the map makers. With every knot and twist, the elders wove not just patterns but meaning, the tale of a great hunt, the memory of a lost friend, the lessons learned from hardship and from joy. Around their simple looms, the children gathered, drawn by the rhythmic motion and the soft murmur of storytelling that accompanied the work. The weavers spoke as they worked, their voices weaving through the air like threads. They recited the names of ancestors, the origins of rituals, the dreams that had shaped the tribe's journey. And as the woven cloth grew, so did the sense of connection, past to present, elder to child, dream to reality. When the weaving was done, the cloth was draped beside the maps, a tapestry of memory and meaning. The tribe sat in a circle, hands joined, eyes reflecting the firelight and the first light of dawn. In that moment, they understood. The maps guided their feet, but the woven stories guided their hearts. Thus, the tribe found its balance, between the places they would go and the wisdom they would carry. The weavers of memory ensured that as the tribe moved forward, the lessons and love of those who came before would always remain, threaded through every journey, woven into every new beginning.